Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls.
This is our first video of 2021.
In this video, we're going to show you exactly what happens to the temperature of water as it boils, and how to take that information and turn it into a line graph.
Spoiler alert, the graph will not look like you think.
Being able to create a graph and interpret the data is an integral part of the student experience. And if you're able to teach your kids how to graph, then you're already well above the curve. Hey, that was a graphing joke.
I thought you promised there would be no bad jokes in 2021.
I did. And that was a good one. Alright, to do this experiment, we're going to take this one to the house.
Now we're in the kitchen.
The great thing about this experiment is you have everything you need already in the kitchen. Grab your pot, put some water in it, and then find your kitchen thermometer. Because we're going to be dealing with boiling hot water and hot stove equipment, if you're a child or an adult who just likes to act like one, like me, be sure and have adult supervision with you when doing this. For this demonstration, we used the same thermometer we did with our sugar glass experiment over the holidays. If you haven't seen the video, you should definitely check it out. It's an excellent introduction to the science of solutions. I didn't comment it on the video, but the recipe is actually delicious. You don't have to make gingerbread houses. You can make suckers or just regular old sugar glass candy. Back to the experiment. For starters, I had my daughter label a sheet of paper 1 through 30. We're going to use this to document our rise in water temperature on the oven. Now with the heat turning on, it's time to take our pot with a couple of cups full of water and put it on the oven. And of course, you can't forget your thermometer. Alright, sorry to interrupt the video. Just a reminder that we do weekly homeschooling lessons, so if you haven't hit the subscribe button, please consider doing so, and we'll see you next week. Okay, back to the video. Now, using our stopwatch, every 30 seconds we would write down the temperature of the water. Water, of course, boils at 100 degrees Celsius, and this is also an excellent opportunity to talk about the different scales like Fahrenheit and Celsius. Up until this point, the temperature readout on the thermometer had been rising fairly steadily. Until now. What's the needle doing now?
Staying there.
Is it moving?
No.
And there we have the point of the exercise. In this separate video that's sped up for time, you can see the thermometer rising steadily until the water begins to boil, and then the needle stops right at 100. It takes a lot of energy to go through a phase change, or in this case, from the liquid water to evaporate to the gas. The heat energy that was being used to increase the temperature is now being used in the evaporative process, and therefore the temperature of the water doesn't change. Alright, now it's time to turn our attention to the graphing part of the exercise. You probably remember when you were in school, you had a graph that looked something like this. 4 quadrants, 2 axes, an X and a Y. Since this is our introduction to graphing and presumably yours too, we're just going to focus on the part, let me show you. Just the positive part, the y-axis and the x-axis. That's going to be our focus today. A graph, of course, is just a photographic representation of data. It's the scientific equivalent of a picture is worth 1,000 words. There are a few rules you have to follow though, and a few rules that should be taught to your kids. One rule is, to interpret a graph, you have to read it from left to right. All graphs are read that way. It may seem silly to say, but if you take, for example, your child's pediatric growth chart, if you don't follow the rules, instead of reading from left to right and seeing that your child is growing along a nice curve, you read from right to left and realize that you've given birth to Benjamin Button. That was so dumb. Rule number 2, it's never too early to get them graphing. Another thing to keep in mind is if you have a really astute learner and they ask you how do you know what to put on the x-axis and y-axis, the independent variable is always on the x-axis. In our case, it's time. We are measuring the temperature of the solution over time, and the time is independent because it's going to continue on no matter what. The temperature depends on the heat and other factors, and the dependent factor always is labeled on the y-axis. In the end, just realize it's an introduction to graphing. You can take it as far as you want to. You want them comfortable being able to look at a graph and understand what its purpose is. Being able to label it, draw your markings, and plot data points is just a bonus as well. In the end, you'll notice your graph will look something like this. A steady rise in the temperature until you reach the phase change, and then things will level off. Science. Well, that brings our first video of 2021 to a close.
We hope you enjoyed the video. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe, and we'll see you next week.
Have a great day, everybody.